Welcome, everyone, to the Games Growth Podcast. I am really excited for our guest today. We have Kathleen Osgood from Ronin Network. I've known Kathleen for now over 2 years since she first started in the Ronin and Axie ecosystem. And as we were chatting just before the show, a little bit's changed since she first joined. We've gone from Ronin being this nascent idea to controversially maybe being the defining model of what the web3 version of a game publisher might look like. But I think that's one topic we will get into today. So Kathleen, first of all, congrats on all the success and growth of the Ronin ecosystem over the past 2 years. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am very proud of where we've gotten. You were one of the first people that actually reached out to me when I joined Sky Mavis, and it's night and day from what it previously looked like and where we are now. And I think we are setting the standard for what it means to be a partner within the space to help some of these games grow in conjunction with like the infrastructure we've created. Doing well, very excited, have a lot on the table and excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, one thing that was top of mind for me coming into today, we think about in gaming how it's such a hits-driven business, and most game companies or publishers are lucky to get like one hit. And I feel like Ronin has come out of the gate with just like 2 back-to-back bangers from like just your early bets within the ecosystem, with the success of Pixels, followed by what looks like going to be a massive success with Kydro. We love the Kydro team. We know those folks. Yeah, congrats on that. Are you on cloud 9? Are you stressed? Like, how are you balancing everything going on with the activity in the ecosystem?
It's stressful because we understand all partners we bring onto Ronin are a representation of how we help partners grow. So they're a representation of Ronin, and we have to put a lot of effort into ensuring they're successful. So not only is it the selection process, but it's also like we're putting our back into really getting these teams out there, ensuring they have smooth mints, working with them on their economies. It's, again, all a representation of us, which also leads to different opportunities and even bigger opportunities down the line. And we're very cognizant of that fact. Like, we have not won yet. I think we are winning at this point in time, but I hope we are able to create just a dynasty with what we have. And we still have, I think, at least like 3 smash hits to really go to cement ourselves. That
love it.
Says that.
Yeah. Awesome. So Kathleen, can you talk a little bit about your background and what brought you to Sky Mavis and Ronin?
Yes. So after college, I joined a social media startup, and I really got a backbone for talking to people and selling things here because I was calling bars and restaurants and pitching them social media. And when you start calling 100 bars a day, you can really talk to anybody, I think, at that point in time. And I helped pivot the company entirely to a full-on web development company, got ownership in the company. We ended up selling the company, but in the interim, one of my developers started showing me his Coinbase account and talking about blockchain. And I'm like, what in the world is this? And I got really into it. I created a crypto resource directory called Calling Crypto, where it was information and guidance, just links around the internet on what was interesting, how to set up your Coinbase account, how to get onto Binance, where to find your alpha. And that got the eye of some investors. And ultimately, my next move was I convinced these large spaces and former trading floors to create a blockchain business ecosystem where I would work with top investors in Chicago, help vet blockchain companies. And this was 2015, 16, so like pretty early on, and allow them to work out of the space. And then we garnered a lot of partners that would help support, but also we would then give access to these budding crypto companies within the Chicago scene. Expanded global, we opened a second office, and then COVID hit. So I was working to get my broker-dealer license to facilitate the investments that were going on within the space and capitalize off of that. And a lot of it was revolved around the co-working space. And so Peter Johnson at Jump, he was one of the investors that I essentially would give access to. And I went to him, I'm like, I want to work at Jump. Jump is the top company in the space, not only in crypto, but in finance. And I want to work here. So they came up with a position for me, director of market development. I helped on the operations side as well as the deal sourcing side, formed a ton of relationships there, brought in some really interesting investments to the venture capital side of things, got even more exposure to the crypto world, became hardcore degen. So really into meme coins, and I would come to Jump and be like, I'm really into meme coins. So like, all right, settle down. Not teaching the meme coin side of things. But what I thought was so cool in meme coins was people wanted to contribute to projects, memes essentially, in a unique way. So they would leverage their unique skills and expertise to like drive this forward. And it was something that was meant nothing. And so I thought like crypto enables this new form of relationship that a consumer now has with an entity. What if there was actually something that can be used to abstract value from the people that are invested in it? And that was Axie to me. So I looked at the Axie ecosystem, and Warren, you were a part of it. All of these people, they were invested in these NFTs, invested in the token, and they were building. Like they were creating infrastructure, they're creating content, they're creating podcasts, and they were contributing it because they felt this sense of ownership. So I wanted to be part of that. And this sense of community, I've always felt from day one, even going back to the co-working space, like crypto really drives this sense of community that I just thought was so beautiful, and I wanted to be a part of it. And Axie was the best example I could think of in the entire space that was doing it differently, but then really allowing and giving to the users. So I went to Ariana Simpson. She's a role model for me at A16Z. And I said, put me in touch with your top portfolio company, like damn well knowing it was Axie. And then I was introduced to Alex, and actually went and got offers from like Axie competitors because I'm like, Alex, I want to work here. I want to do this. I want to build out the Ronin ecosystem. Other people value me, so maybe you should too. And he took the plunge, and I was the first person on the Ronin ecosystem, Ronin game side of things, and we built out a full B2B business.
So can we start by just zooming all the way out? I think we referenced at the top, about half our audience is degens, and the other half is like sort of traditional game executives. Can you talk a little bit about what the relationship is between Axie, Sky Mavis, and Ronin, and sort of how all the pieces fit together?
Mm-hmm. So Sky Mavis, it is the creators of Axie Infinity. Axie Infinity is and was the game that really spearheaded web3 gaming into the scene. And when we hit that explosion and that mass adoption in bringing hordes of Web2 users into Web3, we had to scale our infrastructure, which is where we created Ronin, our blockchain. And with the success of Axie, we created all these pieces of infrastructure. So it's not only our blockchain, but our decentralized exchange Katana, and our Mavis hub, and our Mavis marketplace. And we've worked to enhance these pieces of infrastructure to onboard, we onboarded millions. We want to onboard the next 100 millions, and we want to share those pieces also with other game developers. So our pieces, but then it's also the advisory that we can offer these teams. Like we went through Axie, it wasn't perfect. Like we were basically the first people to come into this new terrain and like kill some bears and, figure out what is coming towards us. And we want to give those learnings to others. So That's why we opened up the Ronin ecosystem that leverages the Axie infrastructure, that leverages the attention we know how to bring to the table, but then also leverages everything we've gone through and can capitalize on it with this really direct relationship.
I think that's really important. And, as we dig deeper into the value of the proposition of Ronin as an ecosystem, for people listening to the podcast, we reference Axie a lot, and the Axie team and as a product, it gets a lot of flack in the space, but we tend to be big defenders. Like, as you said, like there's a lot of mistakes made, but like in any industry, first to market is first to fail. And to clarify, we're not saying a failure. Like, I think there's like, it's a very exciting future.
Like, there have been failures, but now we can position ourselves as learn from us, and we'll be the first to acknowledge we've made mistakes, but now that mistake is valuable to you as a game developer coming into the space, and we can tell you what to look out for. We're not going to say, hey, you need to do this if you partner with us, but we've been through this. These were our options. This is what we should have looked out for. This is what we did wrong. This is what we did right. And I think that is invaluable. And that also is, I think, why Pixels has been successful, and even Kydra, like they've leaned on us to conquer some of these challenges. And we've also been like, hey, you guys need to look out for this and prepare for it in this way, which is different than a lot of the other ecosystems and blockchains because they don't have that experience with the flagship game.
Yeah, exactly. One thing we say a lot is like Axie walked so Web3 gaming can run. It's like Axie learned from those mistakes, and now you're getting to build on both the successes and the things to avoid as you build a repeatable infrastructure with Ronin, right?
So when I first got to Sky Mavis and Ronin, we actually got hacked 2 weeks later. So it was very exciting. And then all of a sudden it's like, what the fuck did I just do? But the way that that hack was handled internally and externally, and even compared to what was going on in the space, it's like, this is the right team to be on. And so we leveraged resources we had internally. We built out an entire B2B team as to how we support projects coming into Ronin, really narrowed in on our value proposition and how we are unique compared to the other blockchains out there, and started building this curated ecosystem of noisemakers and actual true gamers and projects that when a new project comes in, they have all of these resources, both from Sky Mavis and the community and players, to tap into and really take off. It took a minute to get there and execute upon that. People were like, Kathleen, where are the games? Like, we need more games. They're coming. We just want to do this right. And so when we brought on CyberCongs and then Pixels, it really was a testament to the foundation we had built to propel these games into our space. So now we're continuing to do that. I like to think of it as we're like building this army. Like every project we bring in, they are adding to us. My favorite word is reciprocity. Like they better be bringing something to the table because they know they're going to get a meal from us essentially. But then how can we ensure that those users also then become part of our ecosystem, so it just grows and grows and becomes more attractive to any game developer that wants to tap into genuine player base? And I call it our megaphone, this like megaphone of evangelists and players and creators and noisemakers to just take over the Web3 space when they have announcements and when they launch with us.
Yeah, on that note, Kathleen, to that idea of the megaphone, when I talk to developers we work with and they're talking about different infrastructure and ecosystems to maybe work with, one thing that I always shout out for Ronin as a unique differentiator is like, I feel like in the current state of Web3 gaming, there's no better like 0 to 1 growth ecosystem than Ronin to just bootstrap you with 500,000 plus active Web3 players. Like no one else can do that right now.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you. But that's also the beauty of, we didn't just allow everyone and their mother to build with us. Like we are selective, right. We're curated, because if we took an approach of other chains in the space and let everybody in the door, you're not able to optimize attention of your user base. There's a lot of competition and you also lose a little bit of the trust. We're looking at bringing in users outside of Web3. In order to gain that trust, you can't have scams and you can't have meme coins and you can't have these projects that people tap into that we technically support because they're building on our chain that ultimately failed. So like we have a lot of pressure on us because our user base right now, they trust us. They're like, you guys did it with Pixels, you're doing it with Kydro, you did it with CyberCongs. We trust that Sky Mavis will partner with teams that will have longevity. And once we lose that trust with our user base, our power dwindles. Right. It's a lot of pressure right now, but I know that game developers, like they know that they can bring users to the table, but they also know that they can lose them just as easy, because if they're in another ecosystem, a lot of the users are here because they want to have fun and make money. There are other mechanisms of making money in other ecosystems, but there's just as easy mechanisms of losing money as well. And so we really created this like curated, safe, trusted space with our partnerships.
What does the Web3 version of game publishing look like? And my most basic question is that Ronin? Like, does Ronin consider itself to be a game publisher, or is it something that rhymes with the game publisher, both for our listeners, but also for game developers that are thinking about the right partners to come to market with? How do you think about that question of, are you a game publisher?
Very great question. When we were setting this up, we studied the great game publishers of Web 2, and we began structuring our B2B platform in ways that we know what we're good at, and we know that it's a new paradigm, essentially, like within the space, and it all boils down to the relationship with the end user and also how to motivate them and make them a part of your business as opposed to just a exchange of services. And I think that's what we're really good at. We will expand into a traditional model where we're testing with different audiences and we are acting as like a Scopely. But right now, I wouldn't define us as a game publisher because I think that's a very Web 2 word. And it also has a lot of meaning that we're not there yet. The industry isn't there yet. You can't be a game publisher when like your top games only have a million DAU.
Right.
No one's there yet. But what we can do is bring this new piece to the table that no one has mastered aside from Sky Mavis.
Right.
We have mastered how to capture attention and bring users to the table in this new space. And that's what we're good at. And we're going to continue building off that. And we're going to continue learning from Web2 giants and building our expertise on our team to eventually get there.
Yeah. And you sort of previewed my next question, which was, I want to talk about some of your success cases. You said 1 million DAU. Talk about where Cyberpunk, Hydro, Pixel, Axie, where are these in terms of their actual growth trajectory compared to, where they've been historically and also where traditional Web2 publishers are?
Well, such an interesting space to be able to do these valuations of billions of dollars. Well, these games that only have like 1 million DAU, when in traditional Web2 publishing, that's not a lot to begin with. But the amount of like capital being injected into these games from both the player base as well as the speculators it's different.
Right.
So Pixels, they were the top game on Polygon with 3,000 DAU at the time. And not only did we love Luke, like you have to be community facing as a founder in order to get off the ground. And it's our belief that in Web3. Loved Luke. We had a thesis around MMOs and we were looking at some like Stardew Valley-ish type of farming games. We think that Web3 economy works very well in that type of game. But I also really like the narrative of taking Polygon's best game and bringing it to Ronin. It's been interesting building this from a perception standpoint, because it's not only are we investing in these games and partnering with them in very creative levels, each one of our partnerships has been a testament to our power. And they each bring something different and it each tells a story. So I love that narrative of taking the best game from Polygon. And what did that lead us to? Partnerships like Hydro. So when we brought on Pixels, they did nothing different. 3,000 DAU, came on in a matter of weeks. It was 100,000 DAU, and now they're at 850,000 DAU. And we've seen that team iterate, and they are fast, and they are reaching explosive growth at this point in time. We hope to bring that to all of our teams. That initial like, hey, everybody, look over here, but also showing them like where to tap into within our community. We always say like, this isn't a given. Like the Ronin effect is absolutely not given, but it's there for teams that know how to tap into it appropriately and have all the right pieces. So Hydro, I love the narrative of taking them from IMX this time, but this was a different one because original IP on Ronin is something we have always wanted. And I've been after an Azuki, a Bored Ape Yacht Club, but one that is more holistic, I guess, that also encompasses gaming.
Right.
So we looked at Hydro and I feel like we almost manifested it. They came to us and they were like, we have this IP we've been building for 10 years. All of the animations are done. Like we're in talks with some of the biggest animation publishers, but we also have a game and we're really open to suggestions on Web3. We have a comic book and we have a Webtoons community of 80,000 that are just have nothing to do with Web3 that are involved. And we also have 50 million views on all of our TikToks. And I'm like, these people know how to do it. They have all the pieces. Now we can partner with them. I did interviews with like everybody they had previously worked with, like Apex Legend, like executives on Avatar, the multi-billion-dollar movie. And we really understood that this is a team that would work with us and would listen to us and would be collaborative with us. And I knew they had the pieces for us then to do our thing as Web3 experts. Be like, this is how you should roll out all these pieces. This is how to get the community excited. You guys need to wipe your whole Twitter and start from zero and reposition all of this to the community. And they listen to us and they continue to listen to us, but we also continue to learn from them. And we respect all of what they brought to the table and have built in all of their experience. And those are the type of partners we really look for, is ones where we can bring both of our superpowers in this beautiful marriage and bring it to the community who ate it up. People are eating up Hydro right now, which is...
Yeah, I was so excited to see that when you guys signed Hydro, because it was a team that reached out to us a while, months back, and we'd been chatting with a bit. And the more I got to know the founders, I was like, oh, there's something really special here. Like they have the bona fides as far as like the work for hire they've done on some of the biggest IP in the world and their track record, but then also the passion and heart of what they've done into like crafting their original IP And super excited to see that, excited for the future of Kydro.
They have just dove into the community. These are founders where it's like they are tweeting every day. They are on the podcast. They are on the Ronin radio. And the beautiful thing that happened was Pixels immediately, they reached out to them and they're like, let's do a collaboration together. So when we did the free mint, we minted out it's like free mint. It must have been a record. It was 340,000 journals.
Yes.
Which is testament, I think, to the power of Ronin and the interest that we have within our ecosystem here. You got a character in Pixels. And that's really what I want to create within Ronin, is this interconnected world. And I know we're going to have all types of different games all over Ronin, but if there's ways for them to play off of one another, that's fucking cool. And it actually just makes everybody more successful if we're able to work in sync, as opposed to just oh, now there's more competition. Thinking like that is not the way right now in the infancy of what everybody's building right now. Being competitive with one another in the same ecosystem is not the move. It's how do we each amplify one another?
So Kathleen, you're starting to touch on this, and I'd like to dig a little deeper. This is the Games Growth podcast, and we try to really focus on how do, game developers, game ecosystems grow their player base, grow their product in a sustainable way. You're talking about some of these metrics achieved from Ronin, some of the ways communicated across the different projects. Can you unpack that a little bit more? What are the main growth levers? We're not asking for any secret sauce more than you're comfortable sharing, but what are the growth levers? What is the recipe that takes these massive 0 from 1 steps of a game that can go from having no players or 3,000 DAU to 500,000, 1 million DAU, and potentially a number of weeks? What is the playbook?
Right. With Axie, we've ran through every user acquisition playbook. It's really hard to go about UA on a traditional level in web3. So we've had to make our own playbook, and that is the network effect that we've created. And I wish it wasn't just as simple as that, but it is. And that's not just, hey, welcome to Ronin. It's work with us. We're going to use all of our social capital to expose you to all of our player base. We're going to do these cross collaborations in game. We're going to leverage Moku in our creator programs. And that just comes inherently with working with us. Because again, it goes back to me saying all these games are a representation of Ronin. We're going to put our back into making sure they're successful. And that's through our traditional levels of even boots on the ground, event meetups, leveraging all of our community leads in these emerging markets, exposing creators to new projects early. So when we make that announcement, it takes over your Twitter timeline.
Right.
And that's really our secret sauce. And you can't just replicate that. That has been years of building. And now we're building it even more. We partnered with Ragnarok. So just like the original IP I wanted on Ronin with Kydro, we've also been playing with just bringing on general IP, because our whole goal is to continue to bring in Web2 users through these different games. So then the pool is even bigger. Growing this pool is so important to us. And we were approached by, NBC, and at one point they want us to do Shrek NFTs or create a How to Train Your Dragon game. We know our market though. I don't think it's necessarily that right now, but it is Ragnarok. It is IP that is beloved throughout Southeast Asia that we know we can get your general Web2 user interested in Web3 through that IP and through that vehicle, which is why Ragnarok was such an important deal and deals for us to really solidify to bring into Ronin, because ideally, hopefully, it brings in new users. And that is our user acquisition strategy for then Kydro. So Kydro now all of a sudden can tap into new users that Ragnarok brought in. But Ragnarok simultaneously is tapping into some of the users that Kydro brought in. So it's this game all based on reciprocity and ensuring that each unit is playing their part and bringing something valuable to the table for everyone to tap into. And that's the machine that we've created that, again, you just can't replicate. And of course, we are exploring, Juntaro is probably Kathleen. We're doing so much other things on the UA side of things and working with you guys. And just, there is a lot behind the scenes when it comes to the general growth and user acquisition. But what I can speak to is that strategy behind bringing in games that also bring in users and cultivating that type of ecosystem as opposed to a hyper competitive one.
Yeah, so many thoughts here. I'm jotting down notes like crazy as we're talking. And for a little bit behind the scenes of Upptic's history with the Axie team, we did some testing with the Axie team. I'd say the main thesis was like, what is the mainstream viability of bringing in Web2 users into Axie? And we learned some really interesting things without like disclosing anything that shouldn't be disclosed. I would say like the power of Axie IP to someone who's just like never heard of it, and just the quality of the look of the game, how cute the characters are. This was like on par, like the conversion metrics, the cost per install that we're able to bring in mainstream players. But what we found is, and this is a few years back in the time machine, it's still a big bridge to get people to jump into Web3. And I think what we discovered in our work with the Axie team is like, okay, cool. Like top of funnel, yeah, people are super interested, but there's still a big bridge between what the Web3 player is experienced today and what the traditional gamer is ready for. And what you're speaking to, Kathleen, I'm jotting down all these notes of like Web2 growth strategies that rhyme with what Ronin does, but are not the same. So like the things I wrote down is like cross promo. I mean, in like mobile and in traditional gaming, like cross promo between games, like Tale as old as time. Like that's been, probably 15 years plus that's been part of the strategy. But it doesn't look like what Ronin cross promo between your ecosystem games looks like. And as you're talking about Moku, for those not familiar with Moku, I would simplify it to like a gamified questing or reward system, get people to try a game, do particular actions in the game or social media, and give them a reward for doing so. So this kind of rhymes with like incentive-based marketing that traditional user acquisition teams would be familiar with. But it's not, and you can't just copy paste that playbook.
It's definitely adjacent to it.
Right, it rhymes, right?
The thread is community and this new relationship with the consumer.
Exactly.
Of course, there's this like cross promotion between games, but then you also add in that they have an asset that also transfers like from this game, and this asset gives you an asset in this game. And like maybe that does happen to an extent within the cross promotion of Web2 games, but it's a different sense of belonging, I think, that people are not used to in traditional gaming that Web3 really enables, that makes this, what we have here and these strategies, much more powerful, and the ones that work the best. Different strategies in Web2 absolutely take over. Like your traditional user acquisition strategy, it's very hard to apply here. No one's really cracked anything in this space yet, I don't think, but like no one's really cracked that yet. So that's why we have this just like a different vehicle. It's similar, but it's different.
Absolutely. So, we talked on two kind of rhyming strategies of cross promo and incentivized rewards of different kinds. I think the third one, and maybe it's good to unpack a little bit more, is like content creators, KOLs, influencers. That's also, tale as old of time in traditional gaming. But what is different about content creators in Web3 and in Ronin? What is similar to working with traditional Web2 gaming influencers, and what's wildly different?
I think it also just comes down to the asset ownership. And that also pulls in more passion, I think, from these creators. Is, a lot of KOLs can't just get in like influencer rounds, like within the gaming space. I'm sure different games and publishers have offered different types of incentives for these KOLs, but it's just different within the Web3 space, because it's like you have now some of these KOLs may be incentivized by a token, or these KOLs aren't even being paid by these games or even being paid by Sky Mavis. They just own the assets.
Right.
So now, because they know that if I have 5 million followers and I own, I go and buy a bunch of these assets from Kydro, I'm now tweeting about Kydro, I can have direct impact on the assets that I purchased.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that skin in the game, that's a huge differentiator, because with traditional influencer marketing, it's like super clear to any sort of savvy gamer that consumes a lot of gaming content. It's just like, this is a paid promotion. This is organic coverage. And there's this gray area in Web3 of like, there's an incentive for these content creators to cover the project because they're invested in it one way or another. But it's not like, here's your paycheck, talk about me for 2 weeks, thanks very much, like, and they put it in the bank. So the gaming content creators, I follow the most in Web3, they'll cover the same project for months, years, because it's a different kind of model and different relationship with the game teams and the projects ultimately.
Yeah, Web3 is more transactional in a sense from a monetary perspective, but less transactional because I don't essentially have to go to these content creators to like force them. They can make their own decisions and still see the same amount of value abstraction from our game or from someone else's game as if we were to pay them. They can do it on their own. It's a lot of like stepping up on their own that we may not see in traditional Web2 because of the ability to own these assets and the easy access they have to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one time we were talking to Gio and he described the Sky Mavis community, Axie community, as like a political campaign. And I think that's like I think it's fairly accurate, right? It's the same fervor that you have about how you identify yourself and how you want to see change in the world.
Yeah.
A topic I think might be very tangible to our audience. And I'm curious about, to the extent that you could articulate it, the business relationship that you have with potential games that you're bringing out into your chain. So obviously you don't need to divulge details, but talk about how those are generally structured. So anyone who's in our audience who's potentially interested can get an understanding of whether or not it's a good fit for them.
So everyone is completely different, and we can get very creative with how we have relationships with these teams. A lot of these teams as of recent are coming to the table and are like, I don't want anything. I just want to come to Ronin because I know you can mint out Kydro in 9 seconds for $2 million. I know you can help Pixels launch and end up at 4 billion FTV. And that's been part of the strategy, is like prove ourselves so that we don't have to give away millions and millions of dollars of grants, because these users know what we bring to the table is actually worth more than just grants. And the smart ones understand that. We also still do invest. We do grants. We do incentive-based grants as well. And a lot of them, I'm like such a big word, reciprocity, like everything boils down to that word, especially in the agreements that we craft, because I want to make sure that if they do well, Ronin's doing well, because I know Ronin had an impact in that. But also when Ronin is doing well because of what this team brought to the table, they're also doing well. So a lot of the agreements, it's not just your standard investment agreement, and it's not your typical VC, let's try and abstract as much as we can here. I come from traditional VC and I know the power VCs bring to the table, and it's absolutely necessary throughout all of these games. But it's the ones that acknowledge that we are more than that, and that we bring more than an injection of capital can, that I probably form the best agreements with. And they do end up being substantial because it's this mentality of winning together that is necessary. And that's basically what web3 is, and what Axie, brought to the table. It's winning together. These people owning these assets because we allow them to in this new paradigm of a relationship. And then they bring skills and expertise to the table and help grow the entire pie. And that's how our agreements are structured as well. So I don't know, like roundabout answer, but we make you feel great. We get you what you want. And we also have a huge horde of investors that are begging to invest in Ronin-based games, because the VCs also understand what Ronin can do for their investments. Mm-hmm. So if we're to partner with someone, we have really great investors lined up, ready to also invest either with Sky Mavis or next to Sky Mavis for these games.
Well, Ronin, for all its early success, is still a very young ecosystem, right? So I know you're saying dancing around the question, but it sounds like part of what you're saying is like you're iterating, right? Like each game coming to market is so monumental as far as like defining what works and what doesn't. I'm assuming like every launch is kind of saying like, well, this was smart, this was not so smart. Like, let's take these learnings to the next deal. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think maybe that's what makes us unique, is we also, just by how we've talked about Axie, we're the first to admit the value and also admitting like this didn't work, but this is how we also improve. And as we mature, these teams that come in, they have the luxury of seeing that we've done this like multiple times. We've made our mistakes, but we've also had massive, massive success. And so being able to tap into that, people understand value a lot more.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you touched on an important point that I think is worth kind of reiterating to game developers, because a lot of game developers reach out to Upptic when they're trying to figure out their next stage of growth. And if they're on the Web3 side, we usually ask them like, okay, well, what ecosystem are you building in? And if they haven't picked that yet, we'll share our personal opinions on the pros and cons of different ones. And you touched on this, Kathleen, but like at the highest level, there's two main value propositions in what ecosystem, if you're building like Web3, Web 2.5. One is, how are they going to enable my company's successful growth, which essentially boils down to services. And the other is like, what is the size of the bag of cash they're handing me so I can near term continue operating my business?
Yeah.
And it sounds like part of what you're saying with the value proposition of Ronin is like, you guys have built such strong proof of concept with the ways that you can bootstrap growth and the services side of Ronin to be overly simplistic, that you don't have to lean as hard on the like, here's this bag of cash or bag of tokens that maybe some of your competitors do. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, because this bag of tokens is probably worth nothing if you're not able to actually gain traction, and then you're just spending the bag of tokens into oblivion. Whereas people understand the actual monetary value of what we could bring to the table is it's tangible. Like, you can actually see that through our partnerships and through our relationships and what that has ended up. But also now we've positioned ourselves where if you need cash, we have a whole network of investors that knows we can deliver. Mm-hmm. We will ensure that you have money. Like, whether that be us investing in you or us bringing investors to the table.
Right.
And now that we've built that credibility, it's easier and easier to get amazing developers working with us because they know we can bring that in one of those few ways that I have named. And also working with us, again, it's a representation of us. We can't have these games not having funds operate. So we're going to help you get that in one way or another, whether it's through like NFT sales or TGE. Granted, we really like teams that have solid investors backing them, but there's also some teams that we've just seen operate without investment that are absolutely crushing it, that we're like, can we please give you some money and can you please come to Ronin? Because we know that even with slight capital injection, this could be insane. Yeah, so there's a couple of those teams and everyone's really different, but we're able to get creative. And I think that's what I love about my job is I lead all of these negotiations and these investments, and I'm very creative myself. And it's like an outlet to express creativity, but also psychology of things align so that everyone just like feels really good about the relationship. And those are the best relationships, you know? Yeah. You don't want to enter a relationship where you feel taken advantage of.
Yeah.
No one wants to do that.
For sure. All right, well, we're running up against time. I want to ask one last question. I want to talk a little bit about the strategic vision for the next 3 to 5 years for Sky Mavis and some key challenges and blockers between where you are and where you want to be.
We will be opening up Ronin eventually. It changes things. But the way we win on that is we still have key Sky Mavis piece of infrastructure be curated. So the stamp of approval goes from like Ronin, this is a Ronin game, to like Sky Mavis approved this game essentially. But that also comes from right now until we reach that point of opening, ensuring our marketplace has top assets on it and high value assets and has liquidity. And that when we do open, people know how valuable it is to be listed on our marketplace. And it's having expectations of these games. Like, yes, they can launch into the community when we're open. Anybody could do that. But if you are successful, that means that now you have the attention of Sky Mavis and we can bring you so much more value in this way. So it's going to be very challenging opening while still maintaining that sense of curation and ensuring that level of trust that users have with us now. Right. But that just comes with defining things differently and giving stamps of approval. And it all boils down to communication. And if we can prove that users can trust us now throughout all of these decisions that we've made, then regardless of if we're open or not, they can trust us in the future. And now Ronin just becomes a kind of a playground for projects to take off and then ultimately potentially get the full support of white glove service of Sky Mavis. And that's actually where we head into a more traditional publishing model. Is anybody can play, but we only are working with the best ones that have either proved themselves here or in another ecosystem that we're bringing on over.
Right. It reminds you a little bit of Steam and how it transitioned from first party and then approving third party, and then now it's basically open to anyone. It seems like that's the same vision for Ronin and going towards the future. Cool. Well, really appreciate everything you've had to say. We covered quite a lot when in depth, so really appreciate it. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Twitter is probably the best. Follow. We have a lot of social accounts all over everywhere. We also have like, I didn't know Axie has like one of the biggest Discord groups in the entire world. So follow me. I'm Kosgood, KOSGOOOD on Twitter. But then also give Ronin a follow, Sky Mavis a follow, Axie. It's really fun to get involved in our ecosystem. And it doesn't matter if you're like a Solana stan or IMX. We have some really interesting new projects coming to the table that you can get in on from the ground up. And then you could become part of the Ronin ecosystem. Like getting involved in Hydro now is like getting involved in Axie back in, 2018. You're at the ground floor of this. You can have an impact. You can abstract value from it, and you can be part of it from the ground up. And that's a lot of what all the new projects that we're bringing to the table kind of look like. Is this like new opportunity, exciting opportunity to get involved.
Amazing. And then Kathleen, somehow when you are not building with Ronin, you also are an artist and you post a lot of your work on TikTok, right? So do you want to give your personal account a shout out there as well?
I haven't posted in like a year. So the last year I've been traveling a lot. My work is my job right now, but I love it so much that it doesn't matter. I think I'm House Osgood on TikTok if you want to follow me. I paint, and a lot of when I paint, it's like processing how I want to do deals. Like it's actually
the classic artist just processing how they do BD.
Yes. But also, I'm a very emotional person. I think that's one of my strong suits in how I form relationships and do deals and end up in a position where everybody's happy. But I also have to hold it back to some extent because this is business and it's a really cutthroat industry. And so I'm able to let out my emotions via painting and just abstract randomness. But I guess people like them and they have millions of views all over TikTok. And it actually really helped form my backbone for how people talk to me on Twitter because I have so many people commenting on like my babies really. And, a lot of it's good. A lot of it are like, oh, this reminds me of like my true love and all this stuff. And some people are like, this is terrible. This is wasted paint on a canvas. And if I can get over those comments, don't say anything to me on Twitter. That's mean. But like, I don't care at this point.
Amazing. Kathleen, thank you so much for making the time today. This was a great interview. I think hopefully this is opening the eyes of what Ronin ecosystem is building and the opportunities for game developers. And thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Stay tuned. We have a really exciting couple months ahead. So,
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Talk soon.